Have you ever worked in a team where everyone was nice to each other, but nothing actually changed? So, for example, people were nice to each other, but when change was expected, change did not happen. Deadlines slipped, standards slowly dropped, the same problems kept coming up, but no one addressed them directly. Everyone stayed polite, everyone stayed professional, but underneath the surface, frustration quietly grew. If you've ever experienced that, you've seen what happens when a team looks healthy, but they lack healthy accountability. Because here's the truth many leaders discover the hard way. A culture of kindness without accountability eventually becomes a culture of quiet dysfunction. And today we're going to talk about how leaders can build something even better. A culture where people feel supported, respected, and responsible. Let's do it. Do you wish that you could lead your team in a way that honors and glorifies God? Are you struggling to overcome self-doubt as a leader and have a desire to be more confident in your role? Welcome to the Women of Faith in Leadership podcast. I'm Rika, and for the last decade, I've experienced my fair share of managing challenging employees and teams in middle management leadership roles. I committed my leadership journey to God, and it changed everything. And I'm ready to share everything I've learned with you. Now, if you're ready to lead your team in a way that honors God, grab that notebook and pen, and don't forget your chai latte, and let's dive in. Before we dive in, I want to mention something that may be really helpful if there's a conversation you know you need to have, but you've been putting it off. From May 25 or May 21st to 29th, I'm hosting the Confident Conversation Sprint. This is a 5-day guided experience designed to help leaders prepare for that one difficult conversation that they've been avoiding. Over those 5 days, you'll learn how to identify what really needs to be addressed, clarify what needs to be communicated, prepare what to say and how to say it, and approach the conversation with calm confidence and biblical wisdom. By the end of the sprint, you won't just be thinking about that conversation anymore, you'll be prepared to lead it as well. You can register at womenoffaithinleadership.com/sprint. Now, accountability is one of those leadership words that people often misunderstand. Some leaders hear the word accountability and immediately think of criticism. Others associate it with micromanagement. Some teams even avoid accountability entirely because they want to keep the environment positive and harmonious. But the absence of accountability rarely creates harmony. It actually creates quiet frustration because when expectations aren't addressed, when behavior isn't corrected, and when responsibilities aren't followed through, the burden slowly shifts onto the people who are doing the right thing. High performers begin to feel resentful. Leaders begin to feel exhausted, and its standards slowly decline. So healthy accountability isn't about controlling people, it's more about protecting the culture of the team. And interestingly, Scripture reflects this principle too. Throughout the Bible, we see examples of loving correction, wise counsel, and responsibility within community. Because growth rarely happens in environments where difficult things are never addressed. Even Jesus addressed difficult conversations or difficult things. And even Jesus kept his disciples accountable. So it's very important that we need to remember that accountability, when you keep your team accountable, it's not about micromanagement. It might feel like that. So I can give you an example of, for example, where I was working in an executive leadership role. How we started with accountability is we had a leadership team. So I had many people reporting to me, but I had a leadership team. And once a fortnight as a leadership team, we would meet. And it would be a sense of accountability. So they would have to report back to me what was happening in their departments, what improvements were made, what they were struggling with, which employees needed extra support. And it was a really good way. They loved it as well because it was a really good way to keep each other accountable. If as a team we decide that we're going to improve something in our environments, then we can, as a leadership team, keep each other accountable. And so, for example, about 2 or 3 episodes ago, I mentioned that we were a screen-free environment in one of the schools that I worked at. And so what happened was I had to speak to the leaders or the teachers at that point in time about not using screens to keep the kids busy so that they can do their admin. And so what happened was whenever a new leader started there, or whenever there was maybe a maternity leave or a relief teacher who came in, what was really awesome to see is that the other leaders kept that teacher accountable. That I didn't have to speak up at all because they would do the accountability. Because I had accountability with them, they would then have accountability with their colleagues or even with their own team members. So they started having the fortnightly classroom meetings as well with all the educators and the teachers so that they could keep their team accountable as well. So it's just this really beautiful flow-on effect. It's like a domino effect. You keep your leadership team accountable and your leadership team keeps their team accountable. However, I also kept every single employee accountable throughout the year. So, for example, we had our annual performance reviews, which was built up by multiple touch points throughout the year. Those touch points were just maybe online, so a form that they had to fill out and submit to me so I could see how they were tracking along. They would meet one-on-one with their line managers and they would meet one-on-one with me. So there would be about 3 to 4 touch points throughout the year, say every once a quarter or once every 3 months. And then from there, all of that information would be input that we would use for our annual performance review at the end of the year. And it was a really good way to see if they were struggling with something in June, whether that made that progress in September or even at the end of the year in December. So there were definitely multiple points of accountability throughout the year. And so this is just an example. I mean, I can give you lots of examples, but I don't want to talk too much. But I think it's important to just remember that accountability is not micromanagement. It's actually you helping and supporting your team. So let's talk about 4 principles that help leaders build a culture of healthy accountability. Number 1, clarity creates accountability. Many accountability problems actually begin with unclear expectations. So let's say, for example, you've just onboarded someone and you haven't given them clear expectations of what their job role is, what's the expectation, how often would you keep them accountable. They are going to be very, very uncertain and they will not be meeting your standards because you've not given those standards to them. And people cannot meet those standards if those standards have not been clearly identified. If expectations are vague, people will interpret them differently. Healthy teams understand what success looks like, what responsibilities belong to whom, and what standard matters most. So when expectations are clear, accountability conversations become simpler and less emotional because this has got nothing to do with emotion, but it's got everything to do with what SOPs, what procedures, what expectations do you have in place. And I always said to people, and I've said it to my leaders, if I can say it like that. And I've said it on this podcast multiple times as well. What's common sense to me is not always common sense to you. Or what's logical to me is not always logical to you. Because of my background experiences, I might find something very logical, very simple. But because of your background experience, you might not see that same task as simple. You might actually find it quite tricky. So that's why we do need to come up with a standard saying, okay, this is how we need to do it. This is exactly what success looks like. If you are done, it should be like this. And yes, it does sound like micromanagement, but you're not going to check up that person every 5 minutes. You're actually just explaining to them what that expectation looks like. So number 2, accountability must be normal, not rare. Now, in some organizations, accountability only happens when something goes seriously wrong. That is not how it should be, okay? When this happens, the conversation feels dramatic and confrontational, and sometimes you even avoid it. But healthy cultures treat accountability as normal leadership maintenance. Small corrections over a period of time should happen regularly. Feedback should be shared early and timely, not just the negative, but the positive as well. Conversations happen before the frustration builds, not after. And when accountability is normal, it feels constructive rather than threatening. So if somebody starts at your company or in your department, they should know from the get-go that they will be held accountable and that accountability conversations will happen. It should be so much so that they should be expecting it. It should not be a foreign concept to them. Number 3, accountability protects the whole team. One of the most overlooked leadership truths is that avoiding accountability does not protect relationships, but avoiding accountability actually harms them. Because when an issue is ignored, other team members notice it. And I mentioned this before. It was either earlier in this episode, or I think it was in last week's episode. I mentioned that the standard you walk by is the standard you accept. If people see that you are just walking by that behavior, they know that that's acceptable. They see when behavior is tolerated. They see when expectations are uneven. And over time, they may begin to ask themselves, why am I working hard if standards don't matter? I can behave like that as well because nothing's going to happen to me. Healthy accountability actually protects the morale of the entire team. It signals that standards matter and that everyone is treated fairly. And then finally, accountability requires courage from leaders. Yes, 100%. I'm not saying that this is easy. But at the end of the day, accountability comes back to your leadership courage and the confidence and the courageousness and the boldness that you have as a leader. Because almost every accountability moment begins with a conversation that feels uncomfortable. A leader must say things like, we need to talk about something. The situation needs to change. Here's what I'm seeing. Let's discuss this. These moments require courage. But it doesn't just take courage, it also actually takes clarity. You need to go and prepare for those meetings. Because you cannot just walk into a meeting and think you're going to know what to say. Believe me, you will strike a blank and emotions, fight or flight mode or even freeze mode will kick in. And clarity is one of the greatest gifts a leader can give to their team. Now, if listening to this episode today, you've been thinking that there's a conversation you need to have, there's an accountability conversation that needs to happen, you're not keeping your team accountable, things have fallen backwards, and you're just unsure how to approach it well, then I want to invite you to come and join the Confident Conversation Sprint. It's happening between May 25th and May 29th. Over 5 days, we'll walk step by step through preparing for that conversation that you know you need to have. And you're going to prepare for it with clarity, wisdom, and confidence. So by the end of the sprint, by the end of the 5 days, you'll have identified the real issue, the thing that needs addressing, right? That accountability part. You would have clarified what needs to change. You would have prepared for what to say. And we would have prayerfully prepared you to lead this conversation well. So you can go and register at womenoffaithinleadership.com/sprint. You can go and find all the information there. And I cannot wait to help you to prepare for that conversation that you've been avoiding. Now, in closing, I want to say this. Healthy accountability isn't about being harsh. It's about caring enough about people and the work that you've been called to do and the people that you've been called to lead, that you address these matters. Strong cultures are not built through silence. They are built through clarity, wisdom, and courage. And the beautiful thing about leadership is that we don't have to rely on our own strengths alone. Phew, thank goodness. God gives us wisdom for these moments. He gives us discernment. And He gives us the courage to lead with both truth and grace. The other beautiful thing is that He gives us community. He does not leave us alone. I've read this before, but this is why God created Eve, because He saw that people cannot be alone. We need community. We need people that surrounds us. And yes, Adam needed a partner, but he also needed another human being. He needed to be within community. And I just want to tell you that you are more equipped than what you realize. Okay? I often see people or female Christian leaders who are so doubtful about their abilities. But all that you're lacking is just the skills and the strategy to lead these conversations well. Once you have those, I promise you, it's going to be so much easier to keep your people accountable, to have these difficult conversations, because you'll have a strategy. You'll have the strategy on how to prepare for these meetings and how to actually get through these difficult conversations without you getting emotional, without you crying or getting upset, without your palms getting sweaty. They might still get sweaty because that's a physical reaction, right? But your sweaty palms, your sweaty brow is not going to keep you from having that difficult conversations. You can do this. I believe in you because God has called you into this leadership role. You can do this. Now, I really hope that this message and this episode has blessed you. It comes from the bottom of my heart. I want you to achieve the ability to have a difficult conversation and to no longer shy away from them. So look forward to chatting with you in the next episode, and I cannot wait to see your name on the registration for the sprint. And I look forward to chatting with you again next week. Bye. Hey, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, would you take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts? It would mean so much to me to read your feedback. Also, it would really bless me big if you shared this episode with a fellow leader who might benefit from hearing today's message. And remember, put on the armor of God daily and walk by faith and not by sight. I'll meet you back on Monday for another episode.